We're here at the VFW Post 1308 in Alton, Illinois, and we're going to talk to World War II veteran Don Nicholson. And with him today is his son, Don, who is a Desert Storm veteran. So, Don the Elder, where were you in Pearl Harbor when you heard the news about...
I was in college at Kansas State University, and I heard about Pearl Harbor. I was, I guess, probably my junior year, starting my junior year. Well, yeah, junior year. Because I transferred from a junior college. So I spent 2 years at junior college, and I was third year at Kansas State.
And then what did you do? Did you join right away or finish school?
Well, Buddy and I, we volunteered to become an Air Corps cadet. That was Army Air Corps cadet. And so at the time, they said that possibly we could complete our education and get our degree. But, and that was what we had in mind, if we could get our degree before we went to service, that'd be great. But that didn't happen, because they called us, both of us up. He's a very close friend of mine, and still is. And they called us up, and we went into service in February of '43. And we went to Jefferson Barracks, Missouri, down here south of St. Louis. And that's where we got our basic training. And then we went on up to, both of us went up to Eau Claire, Wisconsin I was up there about 6 weeks, and got shipped out to Texas. And my friend, he stayed a little longer, and he was shipped out later. But we parted. I went my way, and he went his way. And I had elected to become a navigator. And he elected to become a pilot. The reason I didn't want to become a pilot was I had a problem with air sickness. And I thought if I got in pilot training, I couldn't take all those maneuvers that they had to go through.
But the air sickness didn't bother you as a navigator?
Well, it did in small planes, but not flying combat in heavy bombers. No, but in small planes where we trained, I had a lot of problems with air sickness, but it didn't bother my navigation procedures. And
then after basic training, you went down to Texas, and then what happened?
Well, I went, of course, navigation school, and then in January 1944, I got my wings and commissioned. And I got a 2-week furlough, and then I went down to Florida to take our what they call phase training, where we joined a crew, or a crew was formed, and then we trained in B-17s for combat. And we were there until I guess about the first or middle part of May. And then we were taken up to Savannah, Georgia, and there they gave us a new B-17, and we checked it out for 2 or 3 days. And then we flew it to Gander Field in Newfoundland. And so one evening, about 10 o'clock at night, we took off for Ireland. And that was my test, see how good I was at celestial navigation. And we'd had training on celestial, but you're out over that North Sea and a long ways until you land. But I did very well on my celestial and ended right up on the proper place in Ireland.
Okay.
And so after that, we went to an air base in it was a little bit north of London, and probably in the outskirts of London. I never knew exactly where I was at over there. But and so we trained further for combat, and I got acquainted with their navigational system, which was what they called the G-box. And that was so helpful because so often as you return from missions, it was all cloud cover, and so many different air bases. You had to be pretty well on target, otherwise you'll be running into traffic patterns from other air bases. So there were so many of them around there because we were up in what they called East Anglia. But I was at this base near London on D-Day. But anyway, right after that, we went as a replacement crew up at Nettleshaw, England, which was the 388th Bomb Crew. And so right after D-Day, we started flying, and I think the first 2 or 3 missions we flew bombing bridges and railroad yards, trying to stop the Germans from transporting materials and troops into the beachhead. And I believe, though, it was on our 3rd or 4th mission where we flew to Magdeburg, and it was a real heavily defended with anti-aircraft. And I know we had one of our gunners. He was a ball turret gunner. He kind of lost it for a while and wanted to jump out. He'd seen enough of the war, but we talked him to staying with us, and he did. He straightened out after that. And missions varied a lot. Some were rough and some weren't. Some were what you call milk runs. But we got a guy seriously injured over Munich one time, I know, and another time our top turret gunner, we were flying, and he had his head into the gun sights looking for enemy aircraft, fighter planes, German fighters, and all of a sudden a piece of shrapnel came by and ripped off his oxygen mask and skinned his face and went right into his gun sight. I don't know whether he passed out. I don't know from the lack of oxygen or from fright, probably a little bit of both, but he came through. And then I know we were flying on when they bombed Caen and St. Lo area for the breakthrough, when Patton broke through the lines. We bombed those areas 3 days in a row. I know, and one of our waist gunners got hit in the leg and with shrapnel and broke his leg. And when we first got there, you had to have 25 missions, then you could get a break, maybe come back to the States and then go back for another tour. But soon after I got there, they'd raised it up to 30 missions. And so we got up to 22, and they thought, well, we'd seen enough combat, maybe we'd need a little R&R. So they sent us to a lovely castle-type home over near Norfolk. And, it was great living there. They took good care of us. And so we came back, and man, we thought, oh boy, we've got 7 missions left, and we're going to make it. Well, we took off on this 23rd mission, and it was to Magdeburg again. And these missions are. The guys always like to pass a lot of rumors, whether it was what they called a DP, which deep penetration meant that you're exposed to the German fighters a lot more, and usually Hitler had moved a lot of his factories to the east, farther away from the bombers, and so we had to go after them there, and they were very well defended too, like areas like Leipzig and Merseburg and even Berlin and beyond. And we went to Czechoslovakia one time, and Munich was another long target. But so it could be a DP, or deep penetration, or maybe a maximum effort, and both of those meant rough targets. But we might have 1,000 airplanes, bombers in the air. And I recall one time we were heading for one of these DPs, and we were out over the North Atlantic or the North Sea, because we flew over water. That was better, because the Germans didn't like to fight over the water, because they didn't have much of an air-sea rescue. And so you'd fly out over the northern part of Germany. And but at one time I recall that I guess we were either an extra crew, or I forget exactly whether we were an extra crew, and you followed along with the other bombers until such a time, and if nobody dropped out, well, then you could turn around and come back, because if somebody did drop out, well, then you'd fill in his slot. Or maybe we aborted, maybe we had a problem. So anyway, but I never saw, as we turned back and came back to base, I never saw so many bombers, wave after wave after wave of bombers, and then pretty soon you saw fighters, wave after wave of fighters, and that was quite a sight. But we went to Magdeburg again, and we just dropped our bombs, and all of a sudden we got a hit in our number 3 engine. It kind of caved in the front end of the plane and knocked out the engine, and we lost communication system. We couldn't communicate. But my bombardier and I were up in the nose of the plane, and so we kind of lost contact, and you can't see what's going on behind you. Excuse me. And we were pretty soon then, after we got out of the flak area, we had to lose formation. We lost formation because our plane was slowed down, and the others, they give it the gas and get the heck out of the anti-aircraft area. Well, so we lost formation, and then in no time, pretty soon here come the German fighters. And man, there were planes flying by so fast. Fortunately, our fighters were on their tails too, so that helped us a lot. And I don't know whether, with those engines, you can't hear anything other than the engines, and whether, we could have had direct hits from the German fighter guns, but I don't know. But anyway, we were kind of flying straight and level, and we were losing altitude, and things quieted down because the German fighters had disappeared. I guess our fighters had fought them off, and so I decided, well, boy, I'm the navigator. I got to find out where we're at, because it was quite important to find the right corridors as you flew over Germany to avoid the anti-aircraft batteries. So we have a little astrodome up on top of the plane where you do your celestial navigation. Well, you can look there and you can look around and you can get a good look of the horizon. So I was doing that and seeing if I could find a river or a railroad or a city or something, so I could identify where we're at. The landscape is pretty easy to identify, and because we had maps. But I happened to look back into the cockpit, because I can look back and I looked directly into the cockpit, and I did that. There wasn't any pilot or co-pilot there, so I poked my bombardier. He sits in front of me 4 or 5 feet, and so I said, "Oh, no pilot or co-pilot. Can you fly this plane?" And he said, "No." So we rushed to the escape hatch, and we clipped on our parachutes first, of course, because we had a chest pack. So we get back to the escape hatch, and it's a little door about 2 feet square, and it's hinged on the upstream side and latched on the downstream side. So we get back there, and pretty soon he pushes me aside, and he says, "Oh, I forgot my hat." So he had to go back and get his hat.
His hat or his helmet?
His hat. He had one of these hard rock hats. And so we get to the escape hatch again, and we're supposed to pull the pins out of the hinges on the upstream side, and the door's supposed to fly off. Well, we pulled the pins, and we kicked and kicked and kicked, and it won't release. And so we unlatched it in the downstream side, and I said, "Well, I'll hold it open my foot, and you go, and then I'll follow." And that's what happened. And it sucks you out of there so quick, it's unbelievable. But it's always taught us, said that delay pulling your ripcord, because for 2 or 3 reasons. One, the German fighters can strafe you on your way down. The other thing is that if military or even the civilians see you coming down, they'll be there to greet you when you land. And so if you delay pulling your ripcord, well, they don't have that opportunity. So that's what I did, and I pulled it barely in time because you have to have good depth perception to find out how far you are off the ground. But I landed in a tree, and it was an easy landing because I landed in the edges, and I was able to get down on the ground, and I pulled my parachute out, which we were supposed to do, and try to conceal it so they wouldn't know exactly where you were when you landed. And as per our training, I ran, I don't know, maybe 100 yards somewhere, and finally found a little spot back under the roots of a tree that was in the edge of a bank in a little ditch. So I got under there and hid, and I waited there an hour or so and looked out and didn't see any activity. And this was in a pretty mature forest area. There wasn't much undergrowth, and so I got out and started walking, and I found out that I decided I'd go to the southwestern direction towards the American lines. I had the option to go into the Americans, or the English, or the Russians, or Sweden, and I chose, well, the Americans. It might be a little further, but I'd rather be there than elsewhere. So I had a compass, and I had a little bit to eat. I had a D-bar, and I had a little plastic sack that said if you collected water and put a pill in it, well, you had pure drinking water, or water that you could drink. So I was walking along, pretty soon I came to this running stream, and I got off of the kind of open area there and went over to the side and sat on the bank, and I got my little bag of water, and I put the pill in, and while I was sitting there for the 30 minutes so I could have some drinking water, I heard a noise, and I looked around, and walking down, probably not over 50 feet from me, was this German soldier with a rifle on a telescopic sidearm. I thought, well, boy, if he saw you, at a quarter mile away, pull a bead on you, and you'd never know it. And so he walked right past me. I held my breath, and when he got out of sight, I took off, and I got out in the underbrush. And it was good that I did, because I was able to eat some blackberries. This was in September of '44, September the 12th. And so I was eating blackberries. And so the first night I decided to bed down under a tree, under a spruce tree, I remember. And I don't think I slept much, but anyway, there was a dog barking in the background, I know, and of course you could hear any and everything, I think. And so the next day I was wandering in the same direction, and then on the third day I came to this Audubon, and I just walked in parallel with it, and I came to this town, and it was, the Audubon went through the middle of the town, but on both sides were the high hills. It kind of reminded me of the hills down in the Ozarks. I thought, golly, I can't climb up those hills because I was in the valley. And so I thought, well, I'll wait. And I kept seeing all these signs along the road, Achtung and Verboten and all those German signs, and I knew what they meant, and so I thought, well, maybe the best thing is I'd probably have curfew at those towns, so I'll walk through at dusk and maybe get through the town without any problem. So that's what I waited until dusk, and I got out on the Audubon and started walking through the town, and there was a lot of people out walking up and down that road, and once in a while some motorcycles or maybe an oxen and a cart or something like that. But as I was walking through the town, some of the people that I met, I guess they were soldiers mostly, Heil Hitler. And so, in Rome you do as the Romans, so I said, Heil Hitler. And so I walked quite a bit, and pretty soon a guy came up behind me and started talking German. And I had no time. I was surrounded by so many people, soldiers and civilians and everything else. And I had, and happened to be by a home, fairly nice home. And so they took me in there and they searched and researched me. Took everything I had except the shirt off my back. And so there's a lot of German officers there. And I think what they were pilots, because there was an air base nearby. So they were getting ready to eat their dinner, and they had me in a separate room. And so they were starting to eat, and pretty soon this wonderful woman brought me a bowl of barley soup. And that was the best soup I've ever tasted in my life. It was so good. So I was so grateful for her, because maybe she felt like she had a son someplace, and hoping somebody maybe would kind of take care of him. But after dark, they they interrogated me and trying to find out how many parachutists came down with me, and I couldn't understand German and they couldn't understand English, so we didn't get very far. So they took me outside and they told me to get on the back seat of a motorcycle, and they motioned for me to, and the driver of the motorcycle, he had a rifle and a pistol, and he loaded it, and he got on in the front seat. Another motorcyclist did the same on another motorcycle, and so pretty soon we took off. And I didn't know where we were going, to the firing field or what, but anyway, we went across this little town, I guess, and it was dark, and they put me in a little room kind of dug out in the hillside, and it had bars over one window, but only had one window. So I was in there, and pretty soon two of these little brown shirt kids came up and started throwing rocks at me and all this, and they had their swastikas and their little daggers, and they were been trained to be very ruthless, I think. I guess they were going to be an SS or a Gestapo person, probably. So I stayed there overnight, and then the next day I think they took me to a nearby airport, and there I met one of my crew members, and they had treated him rough, very rough. He got picked up by the Gestapo, and he was black and blue and bruised all over. They beat him up and threw him down the stairways, and so I felt so sorry for him. And we stayed there, I guess, a couple of days, and they tried to interrogate us, and finally they assigned us to an old man. He was in the service, of course, but he was a nice little fellow. And we got on the train. We were on our way to Frankfurt on the Rhine. That was their big interrogation center. And so this old fellow, it was a 2-day trip, I know, and we tried to talk him into escaping with us, and because Patton was rushing across France at that time, and we thought the war would be over in 2 or 3 months. Well, he told us, or implied that he had relatives and friends in the States, and he was tempted, but he knew better. And it probably was better. Otherwise, all of us would have been. So they took us to this interrogation center in Frankfurt, and I was put in solitary confinement. And so I didn't have a dog tag. I don't know why I didn't have them that day. So they accused me of being a spy, and they got pretty rough with me. And every day they got a little more harsh. And I was interrogated by these German officers, and I don't know, the old movies back in those days, you know how they portrayed those guys, and they were right on the money, because, these were arrogant guys. And boy, they were cocky. And so about the last day I was in there, they really got said, well, we'll let you rot in this place, since I won't tell them anything but name, rank, and serial number. And so that evening, they released me, and we walked across the road into a big building, and there I came in contact with a bunch of other Americans. And I get emotional about this, but that was the most thrilling thing that ever happened to me, just to know that, hey, you felt so much more secure being with others. So it was a great experience for me to do that. So that evening, while we took a train and went to what they call a Gulag Loop, which was a temporary prison camp. And that's where the International Red Cross, or the American Red Cross, well, it was run by the international people, of course, but supplies were furnished by the Americans. But they gave us supplies like underclothes, change of underclothes, a toothbrush and a comb and toothpaste and a razor, and the necessities, the toilet necessities that you needed, and maybe a change of clothes, and we had some good food too. And otherwise, I hadn't had much for the last 10 days or so, or 12, probably about 2 weeks, I guess. And so we were there for a few days, and I know every time that the planes flew over, why we had to go to underground bunker. It seemed like we spent about half our time in the bunkers, because this place was kind of en route to Munich, and we bombed Munich very often. So we were there, and they decided one night that we would ship out. So we had a lot of German guards and also a lot of German police dogs surrounding us, and they marched us through this little town. I think the little town was called Zeitz, but I'm not sure. But anyway, that day, or morning or early afternoon, they had a raid, and lots of times on your trip back, if you had bombs, you couldn't drop over the target while you picked a little secondary target and bombed it. And then maybe the fighters, if things were quiet upstairs, why they came down and strafed anything that was German, why it was free game. And so I don't know, I imagine that the fighters that came down and strafed that little town. But anyway, when we walked through the town to get to the train station, the Germans were out there cleaning up the messes, and I'm glad we had the protection we did, because those people they were angry. So we got to this Gulag Loop, and I guess we were there 3 days, and then they loaded us on a train to a permanent prison camp. We were on that train 5 days and 5 nights, I know. And we went to Barst, Germany, which was up on the Baltic Sea. That was northeast of Berlin, about 90 miles, I'd say. And there, as we marched in, all a POW was called a Krieg there. And so all the Kriegs were lined up in the camp and seeing the newcomers come in. And I saw a lot of my buddies that I'd gone through training with. And so they all greeted, and greeted us, and as we marched in. But we were assigned to barracks, and at that time, the food supply wasn't bad because they got American Red Cross parcels coming in, and we were in a room probably about the size from here to there, and from here over to that wall or that partition. And it was lined with 2 or 3 decker bunks, and we had a little stove in an area here, and we had a little kind of a picnic table out in the center, and the fuel for the stove was briquettes, coal coal briquettes, and so we had a nice group of guys, and I think there were 18 in there, and I don't know, we had about 30 in there by the time we got out, because they kept putting more bunks in and elevating them. The bunks, we had a burlap mattress that was filled with shredded wood, so that was pretty lumpy, but we managed to survive until the Battle of the Bulge about that time, and then all of our food supplies was shut off, and so we really got very hungry in the winter of 44 and 45. In fact, we felt weak, and the colder it was outside, why the Germans would require that we take roll call twice a day, and the colder it was, it seemed like the slower they were to make the count, because I think they just loved keeping us out there in the cold. And but the barracks were up on stilts, about 3 feet up off the ground, and so there's no way you could dig a tunnel or anything like that, because that's was the idea of it, so that you couldn't. During the time when we were so hungry, why, I guess I understand the barracks next to us caught a cat, so they had cat in their stew. And some of them I heard would eat a fishworm if they found any. And so it was pretty rough. And but I don't know, the spirits were high, because every night we'd get up and holler, say, "Come on, Joe," which was Joe Stalin, or "Come on, Ike." And one day, we were supposed to stay in our barracks during an air raid, and since they had that there was an airfield about 5 miles from us near the city of Barth. One day that during an air raid, and the siren was at Barth, and so sometimes it was kind of hard to hear it if the wind was in the wrong direction. But anyway, one day, a couple of guys stepped outside to empty their dishwater after they'd washed their dishes, and by golly, during this air raid, and then they up and shot them, killed them. And, so they meant business, because we had guards everywhere, guard towers, but in our camp we had a couple of the Air Corps heroes. There's Colonel Zepke and Colonel Kubreski, who were air aces. They'd got shot. They were fighter pilots. And then we had a Colonel Spicer, who was our CO. He was a nice old fellow. And at the massacre of Malady, Spicer had heard about it, and he really lambasted the Germans for being so cruel, and where they killed over 100 of our prisoners, they surrendered. And he really told the Germans off, and so they arrested him and put him in prison, and they threatened to kill him or to execute him for treason or whatever, or inciting a riot or whatever. And I guess, according to the Geneva Convention, if they did that, they had to inform the other power. And so the Americans told, well, if you kill him, we got about a half a dozen of them that are accused of similar crimes, so we'll kill them. So his sentence was commuted, but he was in prison till the end. And I don't know if you ever heard of Max Schmeling that defeated Joe Louis. Yeah. And then Joe Louis got him. He came to our camp one day. I don't know, kind of was a PR man apparently, and then he passed out his picture and trying to make a big splash, or I guess the Germans trying to get on the better side of us or something. So, but anyway, these pictures that he handed out, they ended up in the trough in the latrine. We had a couple of high-ranking German or Russian officers that handled the honey bucket or honey wagon, and so they didn't have a very pleasant job. and they did all the dirty work. And finally then, I think it was about May the 5th, the Russians came, and the Germans just disappeared. And so the fences were torn down, and they brought in a herd of cattle, so we had milk, fresh milk, and we had fresh steak, and we had a good supply of potatoes and cabbage and bread. So when the Russians came, we had plenty to eat. And in fact, one guy in the British compound, I guess he ate too much and it killed him. I mean, it was just overwhelming. So you had to be careful. But the Russians, they were so ruthless. And there was 3 women. We were out on this peninsula at Barth, and there was a lot of swamp grass around the edges of our camp. And we were walking out there, and there were 3 women and 2 little babies that had been shot through the head. I mean, just laying out there in that grass about 50 or 75 yards from our camp. So I don't know. They were, and then we heard the story too that the Russians went into a house and they were going to rape the daughter, and the old man, I guess grandfather or something, was opposing them, and they poked his eyes out and went ahead and did what they were going to do anyway. So it was a rough life for those Germans, and I guess they deserved it because they really treated their captives very bad too. The Russians wanted to ship us down to I believe to the Yellow Sea by the rail cars, and the Americans wanted to come in, fly into Barth, Germany, with bombers and fly us out. And so they got in a big hassle, and so it took 2 weeks to resolve that problem. So we were there another 2 weeks, and finally the Americans won out. And so we marched into this town, and in this airport, they had little cubbies, kind of like a pig pen, and it was barbed wire enclosure, and that's where they kept their slave laborers. And that was a filthy place. I mean, but the slave labor had escaped, of course, but there were pictures of them laying everywhere, and that was a terrible thing to see, but that's the way Germany operated back then, was through a lot of captured slave labor, Eastern Europeans, and we understood that any Russian POW, if he, when he returned to his homeland or motherland, he was immediately shot because he was supposed to fight to the end. So if he surrendered as a POW, he shouldn't have. So we flew from Barth to Camp Lucky Strike in France, and I guess we were there for 2 or 3 weeks before we got a boat back to the States. On that boat for 8 days and sick every day.
It wasn't air sickness, it was seasickness.
Neither one was as bad as the other one.
Let me ask you something. When you were in a prisoner of war camp, and so the Americans knew there were probably camps around. When you were a navigator, did you have the intelligence and stuff provided you that, hey, don't bomb here because we might have guys here?
I don't remember ever getting any briefing on that. So often there's cloud cover and you bomb by radar, and if that was the case, usually the target was the center of the city. Now, if you had specific targets, you could and clear skies, you could zoom in on the target. Mm-hmm. Now, when we moved from Dulagu up to our permanent camp, we were in a POW boxcar, And the Germans had the POW written on top of the boxcar, but we were always up near the engine. The cars were near the engine because the Americans loved to shoot out the German locomotives. Either that or you were in between two oil tankers. And so they used the POWs for protection from the fighters. I mean, the bombers, we flew at 26,000 feet. Now that's about five miles away. And so you can't see that much from that altitude as far as a POW written on something.
Okay, and then after you got back, what did you do?
Well, wasn't too long until I got married, fortunately, and had him and a couple of other daughters. But then I finished my school at Kansas State and got a job with Standard Oil Indiana. It's called Amoco, and now BP. So I worked for them after I got out of college and had an overseas assignment. And I worked for them 36 years, I think, and retired in '83, and enjoyed good health. Still kicking.
Is there anything else you wanted to say that you feel needs to be said?
All I can say is God bless America and what a great country America is. I mean, boy, you don't realize it until you've been elsewhere.
You've been through the mill.
I've been through the mill, and it's a great country, and Americans should be proud of what they have here and be thankful.